Welcome to the first chapter of sports marketing. This chapter will give us a good introductory into the sport industry. It'll kind of give us a good understanding of what sports marketing is, how to study it. The great thing about this chapter is for those of you who may have taken marketing classes before, this may be a refresher, meaning a reminder of what you've already learned. It may not be. It may be new things to you. For those of you who may have never taken a marketing class before, that's fine. Don't worry. This part of the class is to try to get you with some basic understanding of marketing and sports marketing, so you have a good understanding of it moving forward. So in this chapter, series of videos, we'll cover several things. Starting first with what is marketing, what is sports marketing, talk about why it's unique, why it's different from other forms of marketing. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about the industry. So what is marketing myopia, and then what the industry looks like today. So let's start first with what is marketing. So if we look at marketing, the first and most basic way to understand understand marketing at all is to understand utility. And utility, not like the utility company. Utility deals with the ability of a good or service to satisfy some sort of need. So in other words, utility is defined as the want-satisfying power of a good or a service. In other words, it is what your product is doing for a consumer. What want is it satisfying? What need is it fulfilling? And there's different ways that it does it. And this can be any type of product, any type of good or service. It doesn't have to be sport related. So, for example, the different ways or the different types of utility are form, time, place, and ownership. So we'll start first with the form utility. These are the physical characteristics that come from understanding a brand. And so, for example, if I buy a shoe that is blue because I like the color blue, then that shoe has provided form utility for me. It has fulfilled the need or satisfied the want of having a blue shoe. Other characteristics could be size, shape, look, feel, taste. It's the tangible aspects. Time utility is more of a product that's being offered at a specific time that meets a need that I have. It's actually kind of interesting. If you ever walk into a grocery store or convenience store or like a Walgreens on a day that it's raining, what's one of the first things you see? Probably an umbrella, right? Or something that rain poncho. Well, it's offered at a time that when it is raining, and so they're fulfilling a need for you based on time. Sometimes it may be on the way home or on the way to work. Those are all things that could be time. And it also ties into our second thing, which is our place. And so it's at a location that is convenient. Something that I need a foam finger, so where am I going to buy the foam finger to go to a game? Well, it's at the game itself. If I need to go and buy shoes for athletic purposes, where can I go? Where I can also buy other types of apparel. Well, that's a sporting goods store. And so place utility is satisfying some sort of desire for a location. And then the last one is ownership. And this is giving you the consumer some sense of ownership in the product. If you've ever gone to Nike ID or similar places where you can customize a shoe, it'll have your name on it. You could put laces in one color and the sole of the shoe another color, and there's not a single shoe out there that's similar to yours. You'll pay for that convenience, but it is giving you some sort of ownership in the product. Okay, so it's important to understand that these four types of utility. So as you start to think about utility, come up with an idea of a product you've recently purchased. Why did you purchase it? What type of utility did it create for you? It doesn't have to be just one type of utility, but it could be multiple types. So let's talk about what is marketing. Marketing, this definition comes from the American Marketing Association, or AMA, and it is defined, marketing is defined as the activities, sets of institutions, or processes for, and I underline the important part, and I'll come back to it in a second, creating, communicating, and delivering and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. If you've taken marketing before, and we'll talk about it here in a second, these underlined words have important meaning. I create a product, I communicate or I promote something, so product and promotion. I deliver something, which is place or distribution, and exchange offerings, and in exchange I give up something that is price. And so if we look at this, creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings is the same thing as what we'll talk about in a second, the 4 P's of the marketing mix: product, price, place, and promotion. And all of this does and creates value or utility, the word we just discussed, for our customers. So it's important to understand that. So what are the 4 P's of the marketing mix? Okay, so essentially this is the marketer's job. No matter what job you're doing, you have some impact on these 4 things. The product, so the good or the service that's being offered, we'll talk about that in chapter 7. The price, so what the buyer gives up in an exchange, we'll talk about that in chapter 12. The place, also known as distribution, we'll talk about that in the 3rd module for a chapter that's not actually in the book, but we'll talk about it for place marketing. And promotion, which is the messages we're sending to consumers. That we won't touch on a whole lot. We'll talk a little bit in chapter 7 and 8, but that is an entirely different class in our curriculum at SFA, and that is sports promotion. So we go through each one. The product, essentially we're developing and managing a product that customers find utility in. And so we're talking about product. It can either be a good or a service. So baseball glove would be a good, sports instruction would be a service, and so on and so forth. The next one is price. Again, this is talked about in chapter 12. It's setting a price that the customer deems to be fair and acceptable. This comes back to this terminology and understanding price fairness. A consumer is going to be more willing to accept a price as being fair if they feel like they've had some voice in it, if they feel like the price is in exchange for a reasonable profit for the company. And this is called distributive justice. Essentially, what we found out, consumers believe through research that a firm is allowed to have a reasonable profit as long as they're giving a reasonable price in return. And so understanding what consumers believe to be fair and unfair is important. The 3rd one is place marketing. This deals with where the product is available. It's at the right place at the right time. So this can include retail stores, but it could also include sport facilities. Again, we'll talk about that in the 3rd module. And the last one is promotion. This is how the customer is going to hear or receive the message about the brand. Advertising, sponsorships, direct mail. These are all types of promotion. So what is sports marketing? First of all, it comes from a larger body of knowledge known as lifestyle marketing. Lifestyle marketing falls under the umbrella of marketing. So lifestyle marketing comes back to this idea of a strategy for seizing the concept of a market by its most meaningful, and I bolded the words, recurrent patterns of attitudes and activities. In other words, lifestyle marketing deals with people's attitudes and what they do. In other words, their thought processes and their behaviors. We'll talk about all of those things as we go throughout this semester, is understanding the consumer behavior behind both the thought process of a purchase, but also the behaviors in which they have. Sports marketing is a big part of what people think and do with their everyday lives. Whether you know it or not, being a sport fan is probably part of your identity. Being a fan of a certain activity is probably part of your identity, and that comes from the attitudes and activities that you participate in. So when you think about other goods and services, we do see a big overlap with things that are entertainment and lifestyle that deal with sport. So I'll give you an example. You may have heard of a term. Let me get the video up. There it is. A company called Rock Nation. And this is a history, a little bit of Rock Nation.
I thought at the minute he entered the business that Jay-Z would be a formidable presence in the Indian industry. He is a draw, and I've heard from the agent community that they're worried.
Certainly, from our competitor's standpoint, we've got to be concerned. Jay-Z and Rock Nation bring a lot to the party. He's got reach to places that probably are different than what typically CAA is involved in.
It comes down to 2 things: the ability to recruit players and the ability to deliver the contract.
As a recruiter, I'd give him an A+. He's done a pretty superb job of picking players that can trigger multiple revenue streams. They are good for contract negotiations, they are good for endorsements, They're good for crossover entertainment projects.
He's got the starting quarterback of the New York football team. Durant is there for marketing. CeCe, he's got a starting pitcher for the New York Yankees. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
In terms of negotiating, I don't think he negotiates the contracts.
With guys who are well established and experienced in the business backing him up, there's no limit as to what he can do.
I am confident that there are more players recruiting Jay-Z than vice versa. Are they overselling? I'm going to get you in videos or get in movies or music? Perhaps. But there's an entree there that can be used.
My sense is they won't change the business. They'll make an impact. One of the earliest pieces of advice I ever got in this business was from Dean Smith, was not to worry about your competition. And I asked him about his rivalry with Duke. He said he never focused on that. It was just about, doing what he thought was right for North Carolina. And that's how I view our business.
So obviously that, oops, bring that back up, I'm sorry. So obviously that is a mix of entertainment, being Jay-Z, and sport. This is where we see lifestyle marketing really start to mix. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the semester. So lifestyle marketing deals with several different things as it has to do with our attitudes and activities. We'll talk about a lot of these in Chapter 6 when we talk about segmentation. But psychographics, which will be our personalities, our behaviors, and our values. Our demographic variables, gender, age, household income. Geographic, so where I live, where I work. People in the north versus the south, and their participation is different based on something as simple as weather. Product and media usage, so where people hear about things, when, and how they play the sport. So think about activity. Think about sport. How do we define sport? Many of my students ask this question. A lot of their key answers are, well, it has to involve some sort of competition, physical activity. The whole point I ask this question is not so we can have a discussion on what sport is and what sport isn't, but more of, as sports marketers, we need to be more inclusive than exclusive in the sports we're talking about. So we're going to define sport as an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against one another. And essentially what we're talking about here, the big debate is, for example, cheerleading. Is cheerleading a sport? Well, from a marketing standpoint, I would say yes, because it includes a lot more consumers, a lot more opportunities for revenue for organizations if you consider it a sport and part of this whole lifestyle marketing idea. So we look at sports. The demand for sport goods and services has grown tremendously over the past few decades. A lot of this has to do with our competition. So things such as the pictures you can see here on the bottom left, I've heard this called a lot of different things. I call it the water cow. But whoever came up with the idea of developing a watering system for athletes on a field was ingenious. A lot of that came because there was increased competition. We saw there was an opportunity for revenue. Same thing, the thing that Nike does. We're trying to combine this idea of lifestyle and entertainment. And us as marketers, we have to understand we're competing for every consumer's entertainment dollar. So how do we define sport marketing? It's in your book on page 3. It's defined as the process, specific application of marketing principles and processes to sport products into the market of non-sport products through the association of sport. That basically breaks down into two different types of sports marketing. It's marketing of sport and marketing through sport. We'll talk about each one of these. The images you can see on your screen here represent one of each. On the bottom left is actually a magazine article. It was placed in a soccer magazine. But as you can see, the person who was lining the field with chalk or paint got bored and started to draw a squiggly figure. If you're a big fan of racing, you know that this is Formula One. They're trying to market the sport of Formula One, so you'll play their game and watch their activities. On the right, you can see a picture of Marlboro being a sponsor of Formula One race cars. Does a cigarette help them drive better? No, it doesn't, obviously. But what Marlboro's trying to do is, if you're a fan of Formula One, you think of their brand over any others. So if we look at marketing of sport, it's concerned with promoting the sport product itself, This viewpoint is the sport property. The word sport property I'll also use the word sport team, sport organization. You can think of the sport property as essentially any type of organization or person or group that is producing the sport itself is known as the sport property. And so this is the sport property trying to get people to consume their product. It's the team trying to get more people to come to a game or watch it on television. It's the retailer trying to sell more t-shirts, hats, and shoes, baseball bats, or whatever it may be. It's people trying to increase the enrollment at a fitness center. It's the 5K event trying to increase the number of runners. This is the viewpoint of the sport property. The next one is marketing through sport. This is promoting a business by associating itself with the sport property. It may not have anything to do with sport, but you're trying to associate it. So this is the viewpoint of the firm, also known as the sponsor. And so this would be, for example, UNICEF used to be the kit sponsorship for Barcelona. You can see a credit card using the Detroit Lions logo. Those are both examples of marketing through sport. Okay. So as part of your activity, essentially what I want you to do is read the attached article in D2L. Write down these following answers to the following questions. Which promotion do you believe is most effective and why? And which do you believe may not work out so well and why? There's no right or wrong answer. It's more of just your opinion. I want you to start thinking about promotions from a sense of sports marketing. Then we'll transition into the next part, which talks about the sport product, which is a good, a service, or a combination of the two that's designed to provide a benefit to one of our three types of sport consumers. Those three types are the spectator, the participant, or the sponsor. And we'll finish there, so make sure you complete your assignment.